Journalist Daniel receives a package from Louis, inviting him to revisit an old interview. Daniel, now older and with Parkinson's disease, reluctantly agrees and flies to Dubai to meet Louis. Arriving at Louis's luxurious penthouse, Louis notes Daniel is aging, to which Daniel responds, "It's part of being white. I mean mortal." Louis mentions Daniel's book didn't reference their prior meeting, implying he thought Daniel had forgotten him. Daniel counters that people wouldn't believe stories about vampires. Louis surprises Daniel by mentioning his vibrating disease, a fact only his family knew. They argue slightly and Louis burns his skin in the sunlight to prove his vampire nature. My pale ass calls that a sunburn. Daniel, nervous, points to his neck, referencing their last encounter. He plays a cassette where a past-aggressive Louis is heard, but Louis quickly stops it. Louis accuses Daniel of being disrespectful during their last meeting, to which Daniel admits he was high. Daniel suggests Louis hire someone else, but Louis points out that despite the pandemic, Daniel still traveled to meet him. Daniel gives in but tells Louis that the tapes are messy and lacking information. Louis tells him he's changed over the years and agrees with Daniel's statement. The two agree on a do-over, and Daniel tells Louis that he'll be asking the questions while Louis will only be answering them. He adds that if anything can't be verified, he'll send it to his researcher. Louis's secretary suddenly stands up and explains that third parties aren't allowed, but Daniel clarifies that he calls the shots since he's the writer. The secretary insists Daniel signed a contract, but Daniel prefers one-on-one sessions. Unhappy, Louis tells the secretary to escort Daniel to his room, but Daniel insists he's ready for the interview. The secretary leaves and they begin. Daniel asks how long Louis has been dead. Louis starts his story in early 20th century New Orleans, where he ran a successful escort business to support his family. One day, an escort urgently calls Louis about a problem during a session. Inside, a man, Alderman, is bleeding and apologizing to the escort. Louis scolds the escort for upsetting Alderman, but she explains he tried to enter her back door. Ouch, I'm pretty sure slime wasn't invented yet, so that would have hurt something fierce. Louis sends the girls for help while assisting Alderman, who insults him. Louis reveals his family name, prompting Alderman to apologize, blaming the wine. Finn enters, informing Louis that a priest is harassing the escorts outside. Paul, the preacher and Louis' brother, accuses an escort of using her body for sin, and she tells Louis she's ready to hit him. Finn drags Paul away, and Louis throws his Bible back at him. Paul, seeing blood on Louis, insists he was sent by the Lord to save him. Louis kicks Paul away in front of the crowd, and Paul punches him back. Louis draws a sword from his cane and threatens Paul. In the present, Louis tells Daniel he didn't want to threaten his brother, but had to maintain his authority. A blond man watches Louis with interest as he leaves. Louis explains to Daniel that he cherishes Paul despite their conflicts over his sinful business. At a party with powerful white people, Louis meets Lestat, a Frenchman. Lestat's comment about Louis' presence offends him until Lestat clarifies it as a compliment, acknowledging the rarity of a man of Louis' race having such privileges. The woman next to them, Lily, tells Lestat about Louis's multiple estates, explaining his privileges. Lestat starts recounting where he met Louis before, and in the present, Louis tells Daniel he felt stifled and trapped under Lestat's gaze. He expresses his desire to confront Lestat for his behavior towards Lily at the party. During a card game, Louis faces mistreatment when others propose a bad business deal. Lestat's words freeze everyone around him, focusing Louis's attention solely on him. Lestat intervenes, swapping Louis's card with one held by a frozen man. After unfreezing time, Louis reveals his winning hand, sharing a smile with Lestat. He tells Daniel they quickly bonded. Lestat's charm captivates Louis, leading them to spend more time together. Louis assists Lestat with his wardrobe and home decor under the cover of the night. He invites Lestat to his family's dinner, introducing him to his mother, siblings, and sister Grace's fiancé, Levi. Paul distrusts Lestat, questioning his faith. Lestat reveals his desire to become a priest like Paul, but his father opposed it and forcibly withdrew him from that path. He admits forgetting what he learned, becoming increasingly agitated. Louis tries to intervene, but Lestat loses his temper, entrancing Paul while recounting his painful religious past. Louis forcefully stops the tension by slamming his hand on the table, and Lestat apologizes, acknowledging his father's temper. After dinner, as Louis and Lestat stroll, Lestat apologizes for upsetting Louis's family. Their conversation deepens, with Lestat probing into Louis's hidden identity and shame, which Louis denies. I'm sure that's not the only thing he wants to probe. Later at Louis's home, Lestat surprises him with a gift, Lily. Louis accepts it, and Lily begins to woo him. Lestat gets into his head, and Louis wonders how he does it. Soon, they all play Let's Get Steamy. Louis can't help but steal glances at Lestat, even touching and sharing microorganisms with him. Lestat makes Lily fall asleep and looks at Louis. Though disturbed by his own desire, Louis can't resist. The two men investigate each other's bodies until Lestat bites Louis's neck. They float in the air as Lestat quenches his thirst. In the present, Louis explains that the little drink Lestat gave him feels better than drugs and creates a bond between a vampire and their human prey. The deep connection scares Louis, and he vows never to see Lestat again. Grace's wedding arrives, and Louis appreciates the distraction to help him forget about Lestat. Since their father has passed away, Grace asks Louis and Paul to perform a tap dance in place of the traditional father-daughter dance. The brothers dance joyfully, and the celebration is a great success, lasting all night. The next morning, Louis and Paul sit on their roof to watch the sunrise. The tension between them eases as they share this moment. Paul asks if Louis still spends time with Lestat, whom he calls the devil. Louis reassures him that he doesn't and won't see him again. They then talk about whether Levi will be a good man for Grace, and Louis agrees. Paul, feeling relieved, tells Louis he loves him and then tragically jumps off the roof, ending himself. Louis is mortified, and present Louis tells Daniel it's the last sunrise he ever saw. Paul said, "Same girl, same." His mother is devastated and blames him for Paul's death, saying he's in hell because of him. His sister pities him, but remains silent. Lestat's appearance at the funeral only makes things worse, as he is more focused on Louis avoiding him. Louis tells him to leave. Instead of facing his mother's blame and everyone's pity at the wake, Louis turns to alcohol. After exhausting his supply, he goes to the escort house to find Lily, only to discover she died 2 weeks ago from the same blood-draining fever. Louis hears Lestat's voice in his head and tries to drown it out with more liquor, but Lestat is relentless. Desperate, Louis goes to the church and makes a hysterical confession, pleading for death. Suddenly, there's a rumble and an explosion. Louis exits the confessional to find Lestat feeding on the priest. Enraged, Louis repeatedly stabs Lestat. Lestat reveals his true nature, explaining he only kills those who deserve it. When a second priest enters, Lestat ends him with a single blow. I'm sure those priests were doing extracurricular activities with the altar boys. He then offers Louis freedom from his suffering, giving him a choice between death and a new life as a vampire. Louis chooses the latter, and Lestat turns him into a vampire, sealing his fate with a kiss. Lestat drains Louis's blood and then refills it, completing the transformation and marking both an end and a beginning. In the present, Daniel and Louis sit to dine together. Their interview continues, and Louis continues the story where he left off. In the church graveyard, Lestat disposes of the priest while Louis staggers behind in pain. Lestat casually mentions that Louis's human body is dying. As Lestat tosses a body into an open mausoleum, Louis notices a small pool of blood dripping onto the ground. Weakly, he crawls towards it, tongue outstretched for a taste. Lestat interrupts, warning Louis that drinking dead blood can kill a vampire. Moments later, Louis unexpectedly bursts into laughter, marking the completion of his transformation. They roam from bar to bar where Lestat teaches Louis hunting techniques. Louis becomes fixated on a sailor leading his drunken friends, feeling a blend of hunger and attraction typical between vampires and their prey. I mean, that guy's a seaman. I'm sure he wants some to swallow. Lestat stops him and says it's better to wait for food to come to them, which happens when a salesman arrives. Lestat instructs Louis in luring him by engaging the man in conversation. Louis looks bored as the man rambles, distracted by the sailor and the beat of the man's pulse. When the opportunity arises, Louis succumbs to his hunger and kills the man, despite his struggles. Overcome by guilt, shame, and fear after his first kill, Louis desperately wants to leave. Lestat tries to stop him, but is thrown aside by Louis's newly found strength. Louis flees down the street, realizing too late that sunlight burns his skin. He finds a milkman, douses himself with milk for relief, and returns to Lestat. Lestat welcomes Louis back, apologizing for not warning him sooner about their vulnerability to sunlight. Safe from sunlight, Louis follows Lestat to his bedroom and shows him a coffin. In the present, Louis tries to justify the salesman's death, but Daniel makes fun of it. Their meals are served, and Louis bites into a live animal to drain its blood. Back to his story, Louis learns to use his ability to read minds and attends a family gathering. He practices on his mother, discovering her deep rejection and judgment of him. When Grace embraces him, he senses additional heartbeats due to her pregnancy. Louis is in shock that she's expecting twins, though even she wasn't aware yet. Grace sees his new eyes and says that the new him is a better version of him. She jokingly threatens him if he leaves for a long time again, earning a laugh from Louis. Louis hands her a wad of cash, saying she'll need it for the babies. Grace thinks he's joking around about the twins, but keeps the cash aside and the siblings catch up. Outside, he talks to the alderman's lawyer about his new plans, but he isn't taken seriously or respected. When he attacks and feeds on the alderman's lawyer for disrespecting him, he calls Lestat to help dispose of the body. Lestat mocks Louis for risking his normal human facade by attacking such an important figure in town. Louis counters, explaining that Lestat can't grasp the unique pain he feels as a queer black Creole man when disrespected. In Lestat's bedroom, now furnished with 2 coffins, Lestat complains about going to bed angry. He opens his coffin, prompting Louis to do the same. Lestat asks how he can make things right with Louis, who requests Lestat buy him the Fairplay Saloon. 5 years slip by unnoticed for Louis, who has been away from his family almost entirely as he's been busy growing his business. When he visits Grace, he finds her with a newborn. Holding the baby awkwardly, he's overwhelmed by its scent and liveliness, causing his fangs to emerge despite his efforts to resist. Back in the present, Louis claims he no longer feeds on humans, and Daniel asks if Louis ate the baby. Louis constantly avoids a direct answer, shifting the conversation to other vampires who exploit the COVID-19 pandemic for feeding and conversion. Meanwhile, another servant sits beside Louis, offering his neck for feeding before leaving and passing out. Back in Louis' story, Grace returns to find the baby on the floor, abandoned. Louis is overwhelmed with guilt and confides in Lestat about nearly consuming his nephew. Contrary to Louis's expectations, Lestat reacts by emphasizing the inevitability of cutting ties with his human family as they age, and he doesn't. Lestat comforts Louis, assuring him they are now each other's family. He admits he's neglected their relationship and surprises Louis with tickets to an Italian opera and new tuxedos. During dessert with Daniel, Louis confesses that he idolized Lestat and would do anything for more time with him in their early days. He recalls how he eagerly accompanied Lestat to the opera. Lestat, who witnessed the opera's original performance, becomes furious and disappointed at the tenor's underwhelming performance. After the show, Lestat lures the tenor to their rooms, where Lestat plays the piano and guides the tenor through the opera's correct performance. He ruthlessly criticizes the tenor for every mistake until the man meets Lestat's expectations. Finally, Lestat ends the tenor's career by slashing his vocal cords. Louis watches in horror as Lestat humiliates and then ends the opera performer. When Louis expresses his disgust, Lestat accuses him of denying his true vampiric nature even after 6 years. As a gesture of reconciliation, Lestat offers to share the tenor's blood with Louis, who reluctantly agrees. The two feed on the tenor together for hours. In the present day, Louis and Daniel sit at the dining table. Louis reflects that he never learned to embrace killing. He admits to eating 1 human meal per week to anchor his connection to his former humanity, despite the taste being bland for him. Daniel shares that it's the dessert he ate after proposing to his first wife and stops recording the interview as the two eat their dessert in silence. This is a unique series, and that was just the first 2 episodes. Should we cover more?
Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications. And leave a like, it really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.